Hello, welcome to another episode of Jim's Allotment Garden. Okay, so it's time to put the parsnips in. So what I'm going to do is put in 3 rows, and across those 3 rows I'm going to mix up the seed. I'm going to be putting in 4 different varieties. So I've got Gladiator F1 from Wilco's, I've got Hollow Crown from Wilco's, I've also got Javelin F1 from Wilco's, I've got White Gem from Wilco's, and I've also got these White Gem, same variety. These are from Deary. So there's sort of 4 sort of varieties, if you like. Now, what I'm going to be doing is mixing these seeds up. So I'm going to be putting all 4 different seeds into the same 3 rows, because during different years, different weather conditions, and all the rest of it, you find that some varieties grow better than others. Now, parsnips grow well in my ground, but what I do find, which is what most people find, is parsnips are a bit of a devil to germinate. Now, as soon as you've got them germinated, they'll grow away and they'll be fine. You can, as long as you weed them and keep them, reasonably well watered, they'll grow away during the year, and obviously let them get a frost on them towards the end of the year, and then, sort of dig them up then, and then, they'll be fine. So I'm putting these into sort of fertile ground. It's not been mucked this year, it's where the potatoes were last year, so it did have a load of muck on it last year. You need to put them in ground which is reasonably rock free. So no stones or anything like that. So you want ground that's really well dug, fine tilt. So basically what I've done is I've dug the ground and I've rotivated it all over. So it's a really nice fine tilt. Rake that all level, get any stones out that you can find, because basically what you want to do is, if basically when the seed germinates, it'll send down like a tapping root. It'll go straight down. If that hits a rock or a stone or anything like that in the ground, what it'll do is then split, and that's when you get parsnips to split and all the rest of it. So obviously you want all your parsnips to look like this, so it's all sort of one root, so they're easy to peel and sort of wherever else. But so what you want is the least amount of rocks in the ground or stones in the ground as possible. So if you have got part of your garden or part of your allotment where there's reasonable amounts of stone, then obviously avoid planting parsnips there. And then what I'm doing is planting these about sort of ½ an inch to an inch deep in the ground. I'm not going to chip the seeds in any way, shape or form. I'm going to put them in the ground dry, because tomorrow and the day after we're predicted to have some rain, so this is the ideal time to do it. I dug and rotivated the ground yesterday, so the ground's all really nice and loose, so that when they do germinate and the root goes down, it'll find a nice straight root all the way down, and then they'll sort of grow away. All you need to do then basically is keep them in rows, so you know where they are. What I typically do is put a string across the row so I can tell where the plant should be, and then weed between them. Obviously keep them weed free, and then sort of keep them reasonably well watered. You don't need to water them all the time, but if you do find that you go through like a dry period, it's well worthwhile just giving them a bit of water, and then the parsnips should grow away quite nicely. I will be keeping a few seeds back to put in the parsnip propagator, and I'll show you that probably in the next video or the one after that. That's just in case I get any sort of spaces in the rows where they haven't germinated. What I can do is just transplant them in, but it is really difficult to do that with a successful result. But I'll show you the best way of doing that in a couple of weeks' time. So that's parsnips for you, and I'll show you now putting them in the ground. Okay, so I'm just putting the parsnips in. So as you can see, I've got 3 rows, and the rows are about a foot apart. It does recommend that you put them a bit further apart than that, but I always put mine about a foot apart. Now they're the seed. As you can see, they're sort of quite flat, And what you basically want to do is make drills in the ground like that, and then what you want to do is very sparingly just put a seed every few inches. And then what I'll be doing, these are hollow crown that I'm putting in now, and what I'll do is I'll go back after, and I'll put in the other varieties on top of this. So I'll have basically 4 varieties in all 4 rows, and then whichever ones germinate will be the ones there. As soon as you've got them in the hole like that, obviously you can spread them out a bit easier if you've got 2 hands free, which I haven't at the moment, but basically spread them out like that, and then basically all you do is then just close over the drill in the ground, and then you don't need to worry about watering them. Just leave them in the ground. If the ground's moist, obviously if the ground's really dry, then give them a bit of water, but apart from that, that's all you need to do. Okay, so that's all of the seeds in across the 3 rows, and so basically what I've done is I've mixed them all up, so by the time you get the 4 varieties in, as you can see, there's quite a few seeds in there. But all you need to do then is just go up the row and basically just knock the ground in like that on the 3 rows, like that, and then just pat it down, and that'll be more than sufficient. There should be enough moisture in the ground anyway to germinate them. But the one tip I can give you is what I always do is prepare the ground, get it all ready for the seeds to go in, get all your seeds and everything ready, and then what I do is I go and wash my hands, make sure my hands are absolutely perfectly clean before I handle the seeds, because you can get bacteria on your hands on the seed and it can cause you to have germination problems. As I've explained, parsnips are quite difficult to germinate, and to give yourself the best opportunity, as I say, what I do is I put in these 4 varieties, and then I wash my hands to make sure there's no bacteria on my hands or anything like that, and then I put the seed in, all 4 in the same row, and then, because basically you want to end up with a parsnip every about 4 to 6 inches along the row, so most of these I'll probably pull out as I'm thinning them out if they all germinate, but you are sort of guaranteed to get spaces in the row, and I'll show you what to do about that in the coming week, as I say, because I'll use the parsnip propagator, and then just gently tap it down like that. I'll go back up the side of the row here, just knock the ground in like that. As I say, the ground needs to be really nice and loose. You can see how loose this ground is. It's almost like dust, so I rotivated all this and everything so it's all nice, and then I'll basically just carry on up there. I'm not going to water it because it is going to rain tomorrow. If it wasn't going to rain tomorrow, I'd give these a light watering, and then I'd basically leave them for a week or so before I water them again. Now, it can take up to about a month for parsnips to germinate, so I'm not expected to see anything growing here for at least 3 weeks really. So, you know, if they don't come up straight away, don't worry, they will germinate eventually. If the weather does get cold, what you can do is put a fleece over the top just to keep the warmth into the ground, but apart from that, just leave them to it and they will eventually germinate. So that's what you do with parsnips this time of year. Okay, so it's time to pick out the Calabrese. As you can see, they're about sort of 3 inches high now. Now I could have done these a lot earlier, but I had some later germination, so some of them are a little bit smaller. That's just a hollyhock there I'm going to pull out. And I'm doing these, obviously compost is a little bit hard to get at the moment, due to one thing and another. So what I'm trying out is this new compost. I've not tried it before, I don't know if you can see that, but it's Hugh Mack's original compost. I'll give it a go with these and I'll tell you what that turns out like. But from the feel of it, it's pretty good compost, to be honest with you. So, Calabrese or broccoli. The best way to prick it out, exactly like any other brassica, is just get your finger underneath the first plant like that. And what you want to try and do is pull off, without touching the plant itself, you want to pull off like a root like that. And then basically all you need to do then is just make a hole in the compost and place it in at about the same level as it was in the tray. Okay, so with brassicas, the weakest part of the plant is the root when it's an adult plant. So what you want to try and do, if you can, is if you can wait till they get to kind of that big, which as I say is like about 4 inches high, is try and put the plant in about as far as the first sort of seed leaves, if you like. Not you don't want to bury the seed leaves, but you want to try and put it in like that, so the root ball forms a bit further down, and then when they go into the open ground, you can then plant them a little bit deeper again, and then the plant tends to be a lot more stable. Now, with Calabrese or broccoli, these ones, only grow to, I don't know, about 18 inches or so high, so they're not particularly big. The so you know, stability wise it's not too bad, but if you look at things like kale, now that can grow to kind of 6 foot high, so you need to stake those plants. It's the same with Brussels sprouts. If you grow Brussels sprouts, you're going to need to, if you're in, you know, most certainly open ground, as in, you know, the wind gets through, you're going to need to put some kind of protection up or stake in the plants or whatever. So I'm just putting my finger under, I don't know if you can see that, I'm just putting my finger underneath the plant. I'm not touching the leaves or the stalk of the plant, because if you damage the roots will recover. If you damage the stalk, the plant will never recover from that, and if you damage the leaves, then the plant will recover from that, but you know, it's going to take a while for it to reproduce the leaves and that. So the best way to do it is to make a hole in the compost like that, and then just put your finger underneath, only grab the roots, knock off any excess, so you basically got the roots like that, and then just drop that in the pot. Now, all brassicas like the firm ground, so you know, don't be worried about firming them down too much. You know, you can you know, put them in, where some plants prefer the soil to, you know, the compost to be loose. With brassicas, they quite like the ground to be reasonably firm, so you can, you know, you can push them right in there. Obviously, get the roots spread out as much as you can, and then you can firm them down with your fingers like that, and not worry too much about it. Right, so I'll just finish these off. Now, these aren't going to be in here too long. They'll probably be in here about 2 weeks. I've already got the ground prepared. So to prepare the ground, what I've done is I've put some chicken manure, and I've also put some rotted down wood chip. That's for water retention and sort of carbon in the ground. That'll hold the moisture and keep them nicely damp. And then that's all been dug over about 2 weeks ago and rotivated. And then the ground, I've left the ground, so you can do it 2 or 3 weeks beforehand, because, as I say, it likes the ground to be firm. Any plants that prefer to germinate in or grow in ground that's loose, what you want to do is literally dig that or rotivate it just before you put them in. Then the ground's nice and loose and stuff like that. If you want the ground to be harder or more compacted, then obviously dig it a few weeks ahead of time, and then you know, the ground will have sort of settled a lot more by the time you put the plants in. So when I put these in, what I will be doing is spacing them at about a foot apart. I'll put 3 rows in, and then the rows will be sort of about a foot apart, slightly less than a foot apart, maybe 10 inches. And then the plants themselves will be sort of a foot. So I'll make like 3 rows of plants reasonably close together. The reason I do that is, again, because of this support the plants will give each other. Now, if you plant them reasonably close together, then as they're growing, they will tend to support each other, so they'll kind of lean on each other, if you like. Whereas if you plant them a bit further apart than that, they can potentially fall over in the ground, and then obviously they won't grow quite as well. But if you plant them that close together, I find that works best for me, because the plants tend to support each other as they're sort of growing up. Just gently teasing those apart, so there's 2 quite close together there. And then I'll put a little bit of lime on the ground. I mentioned this for the cabbage, but brassicas don't mind lime. If you pour in manure on the ground, most manure is acidic. In fact, I think all manure is acidic. So if you keep putting manure on the ground, your soil will slowly but surely become acidic, i.e. low pH. If you put lime on with potatoes or other crops like that, then they don't tend to like that, and you can get scab on the potato, where brassicas really don't mind lime, and it also holds back sort of fungal diseases like club root. So I'm just doing these last few now. These are really small ones, as you can see. This is why I've left it to get these to germinate. There's just one more left, so I'm just short. I've got 2 pots too many here really. So I'll put those in, and then obviously these little ones will soon catch up. Now what I will be doing, one final note, is now I've got these in pots. I've damaged that leaf on that one. Look. Now I've got these in pots. I'll wait for a week or so, and then I'll set another batch. So I'll do 3 batches of these in succession of each other. So these will go in the ground. They'll be in the ground probably about 6 weeks before they sort of grow, and then start to form the florets. And then if I grow, put some seed in a couple of weeks' time, then by the time these generate the florets and we pick them, then I'll have a new set of these ready to go in the ground. So I'll, as I say, I'll wait for a week or so and then put a second batch in, and then I'll be ready for the second lot. So that's what you need to do with Calabrese or broccoli right now. Okay, so I'm just about to chop down the comfrey now. The bees love comfrey, as you can see, they love the flowers. But unfortunately, if you leave it too long, the flowers very quickly, within a week or so, turn to seed, and then the seed goes everywhere. Little black seeds will go over everywhere, and then you'll get comfrey plants literally everywhere. It's a very easy to sort of spread all over the place, and your allotment will be full with it before you know where you are. So what I always do is, as soon as it gets to this stage, is cut it down. And what I use to cut it down is one of these. Now you can use pretty much anything, but this is a tool which is used for coppicing wood, or sort of layering hedges and things like that. It's a bit of a beast, so you won't want to hit yourself over the leg with it. But I find that if you sort of chop through that at the bottom, you can be quite rough with these plants. They are quite robust. The roots go down about 2 or 3 foot into the ground, and so you won't damage the plant by chopping it down with that. But the one thing that you must do with all comfrey plants is wear gloves, and you want to keep it away from your arms as well, because I don't know if you can see all the little hairs on there. Well, they're basically an irritant, and if they get on your skin, you'll have like a rash on your hands and stuff like that, and on your arms. So cover your arms, most certainly wear gloves, and then sort of keep it away from your face, obviously. And all you do is you chop it down, chop it up, and then put it into a tub like this. Now if you don't have a tub like this, I've got, basically this is a tub, and I've got a hole at the bottom there where that drains into this pipe here. Then I can obviously siphon off the tea into bottles. As you can see, I've got quite a few there. If you haven't got that, simply by putting this into a bucket, put a brick onto it to weight down, and then sort of keep it in the away from sort of direct sunlight, it will still sort of break down, and then you can just pour it out of the bucket into a bottle. But because it tends to smell a little bit when it breaks down, I tend to do it like this, and I don't need to basically touch it and get it on my hand, so I can just put it into the bottle. And then as soon as you got it in the bottle, obviously put the top on it, and it'll keep for 12 months or so. This is all of these bottles here were made out of sort of the autumn crop, if you like, off the comfrey. And then I use this to feed the tomato plants. Water it down sort of 10 to 1 in the watering can, and then water it onto your tomatoes, and it's an absolutely fantastic water liquid feed for your tomatoes. What you can do is obviously feed it to your strawberries, anything that's fruiting. It's really good for. It's also good for root crops as well, a lot of potatoes and things like that. But I typically use it for the tomato as a tomato feed. So what I'll do now is, now I've emptied this out, I'll put the mesh back in the bottom, which is just like a fine nylon mesh. It's basically just to stop any dirt going down and blocking the tap. And then I'll sort of chop this down, and then within probably about a week or two, it'll start to break down, and then the juices off it will come down and go into the bottle, and I can use it obviously for feeding the tomatoes. So I'll just show you me doing that now. Okay then, so obviously try not to touch the plant too much, so I'm just going to hold it back on my legs there, and you can see the bottom of the plant here. So I'm just going to basically chop away at the plant like that. It chops through quite easily. then all I've got to do then is basically just collect up the stalks. As you can see, the stalks are quite sort of, you know, sort of succulent in the way. You know, they're quite juicy. So you know, all of that's going to make really good fertiliser for tomatoes. All I need to do is just basically pick this up. I've chopped it into kind of 1 foot length, but you can break it down and it goes in the box. Sort of fold it over a little bit, and you could just pull. You can pull the other leaves off really, like that. Okay, so there are all the sort of stalks sticking out of the ground now. That will. I know it looks quite brittle when I chop it down with the old sort of hand axe, but this will recover really quickly. So you know, don't worry about damaging the plants. They are very robust plants. So that'll start growing back in the next sort of few weeks, and that'll be back up here before you know where you are really. So within a month or so, that'll be back to where it is. So you can put your second batch in. So that's all in the box now. All I need to do is basically put on this tile on top just to weight down, put the lid on like that, and then just leave that to break down in there. Then as soon as it starts breaking down, it'll fill this bottle with juice. As soon as the bottle's full, then obviously take that off, put the top on it, put the new bottle in, and away you go. And before you know where you are, with a box full of Comfrey, this isn't completely full, but I'd say a box full of that will make probably about 5 or 6 bottles of you know, sort of 10, 11, 12 litres of fertiliser, which will last in the greenhouse for a season really. So you know, with just one box like this, you know, you can feed your tomatoes for a year pretty much. So, and it's completely free. So that's how you do Comfrey tea. Okay, I typically use this string. I haven't got a reel of it at the moment, but this is typically bought from the pound shop or garden centre, stuff like this, and it's a polythene, but unfortunately, as you can see, after a year, it tends to kind of perish and break, so you can only really use it for one season. So what I've been doing is looking around for a better alternative, and I found these two. This one's Strong Power, which is basically used for fishing. Now this is a nylon cord, which is incredibly strong. Now this shouldn't break down with UV light and stuff like this. This should last me for a couple of years, and that was bought from Amazon, and it's about £6 for 100 metres. But I've also bought this one. I've already used this one actually to do some of the lines this year, and it is really good stuff. And then there's this slightly thicker stuff, which is from Faithful, as you can see, and this is called Brickline. And I intend to use this as well. Now this again is a nylon sort of string, if you like. Now this is a bit sort of gentler on the hands than this stuff. This tends to be quite sort of sharp. But they're both really good for, you know, lines, tying things up and stuff like that, because they won't sort of degrade, and therefore, rather than buying 2 or 3 reels of this every year, hopefully if I use this, then this should last me quite a few years. So I thought that would be worth a shout. So they're both from Amazon. They're both about £6 a reel. That's sort of brick lines, obviously for lame bricks, but you know, really good for using in the garden. And that's actually fishing twine, but sort of fishing line and ding bear, as you can see. But I just thought it was worth mentioning those two that I bought this week. Okay, so these are the tomatoes that we've grown. As you can see, they're getting quite big now. I've got a couple of weeds in here. Just pull them out. But as you can see, the germination of them is pretty good, and they've grown really well. So now that they're about sort of 2–2.5 inches high, what I'm going to do is prick them out. Now this is Moneymaker, and I'm going to be growing something like 20 of those, and then I've got Golden Sunrise. Again, you can see they've grown pretty well. I'm going to be growing 3 of those, and then I've got these ones here, which is Gardener's Delight, which are the little cherry tomatoes. I'm going to be growing sort of 3 or 4 of those plants. So what I've done is, obviously I can get all these in one tray. So all of the brown and green pots there are going to be money maker, and then these black ones at the end here, which you can't quite see, those are going to be the Golden Sunrise and the Gardener's Delight. So in the same way, obviously handle these really carefully. What you want to do is get your finger underneath. So as there's a hole here I can show you here, so basically just put your finger underneath, and then what you want to do without touching the plant itself is just tease out just the roots, as you can see there. Now I'm going to plant these slightly lower, not very much so, but half an inch or so in the pot here. I'm putting these in 4-inch pots. You don't need to sort of pack the compost down too much with these. You want to keep it reasonably light. Again, I've filled the compost to the top of the pot. These are 4-inch pots. I've just dropped the plant in like that, and very gently just drop it back in like that. Now with tomato plants, again, what you will do when you're planting it into the greenhouse or into its final sort of location, wherever you're going to plant them, what you want to do is plant them a little bit deeper. So what I typically do is, you can't really see them on these plants yet because they're not big enough, but if I just show you this one, you've got these first leaves here. These are the seed leaves, so they're kind of pointed, and then you've got the first true leaves, which are the sort of serrated edge seeds. So when I plant it in the ground, I'm going to plant it so that these are underground, and also the first true leaves are underground. So I'm going to plant it probably about 6 inches or so deeper when it's in the final ground. The reason for that is if you plant tomato plants deeper in the ground, any of the stalk which is underground will generate more roots. So basically you get more roots on the plant. So I don't know if you've grown tomato plants before, what you'll notice is as the plant develops, you'll start to get along the stalk at the bottom here. What you'll tend to get is like little sort of roots starting to come out of the bottom. So if you plant the plant deeper in the ground, those roots will obviously grow into the ground and generate more roots. If you've got more roots, it'll support the plant better, and then the plant will typically have more fruit on it, which is basically what we're after at the end of the day. So I'm just planting these a little bit lower than they are, as I say, than they were in the seed tray. So these are going in about an inch, about half an inch or so deeper than they were in the tray. So I've got no choice with these. I'm going to have to pull them apart with the stalks, which I'm obviously trying to avoid. There's two basically grown together, but they'll make for good plants. So as I say, I'm planting them a little bit deeper. Now what you need to do is, obviously, when you first transplant these into the pots, you don't want these to be in direct sunlight, because you have compromised the roots a little bit, so they are prone to drying out. Now what you can do to help this is do what I do with these trays. You can't really see here, but underneath here I've got some matting. And what that matting will do is soak up the water when I water them, and then that'll keep the sort of the surroundings and the bottom of the pots nice and damp. And through capillary action, it'll sort of keep them moist. So even though they've got sort of less roots because they've been compromised, because obviously I've broken a few whilst transplanting them, it'll keep the plants going. But if you don't have this, you can always put some just on some kitchen roll or some old towels or blankets. That'll do quite nicely. The other thing you can do is obviously keep them out of direct sunlight for a few days till they start to grow again, because the plants will suffer. I'm not going to use that one because the roots are really damaged on that one. You want a decent, you want a decent kind of root ball, as you can see there, to support the plant. That one has got at its roots. So that's one that there was two together, and the roots are not everything they should be. So these ones here, I'm just teasing them apart. That one's not too bad. This is the problem when you sow them in the tray a bit too close together. And obviously I did this reasonably quickly. So if you've got sort of that many roots, it probably will grow, but obviously I've got loads of plants here, so I don't need to be, I can be quite picky by the plants I actually pick to put in here, because I only need kind of 20 odd of them, and I must have 50 odd plants here. The other plants that I don't use obviously will be donated to other people. So I've already had a couple of requests for plants because they've not been able to get seed this year. So they'll all be used, don't worry. Right, as soon as you've done that, then as I say, give them a good water and keep them well watered. Obviously you need to be free draining, so you don't want them sitting in water, but you need to give them water every day, at least until the roots have formed and filled the pot. You can tell when they've done that because the roots will start coming out the bottom of the pot on the tomatoes. And then you'll grow them on in here till they get probably about 9 inches to a foot high. As I say, when you bury them, you need to bury them about 6 inches in the ground, so there's only sort of 3 or 4 inches sticking above the ground, which is typically what I do. And then they'll have that much more sort of root in the ground when they've developed, and then it'll make for a stronger plant and therefore more tomatoes. So that's what you do with tomatoes right now. We'll see the other varieties I've got here, which are Golden Sunrise and Garden's Delight. Do them exactly the same way as this. The Golden Sunrise is pretty much the same as Moneymaker, which are these I'm putting in now. So they'll be planted in exactly the same way. The Garden's Delight, I typically grow them in pots. They're the cherry tomato, and I find that they sort of grow better in pots because they're more of a bush variety, where these are a single sort of stalk, and I'll take all the side shoots out of these. I'll let the Garden's Delight grow as a bush. Well, that's the way I typically grow them. So if I put them in a pot, then obviously I can move them about, and they've got a bit more room to themselves as well. So that's what to do with tomatoes, and I'll show these in a few weeks' time when they're ready to put into the greenhouse. So I hope this episode was of some use to you. Please don't hesitate to put any comments or questions you got below, and I'll always get back to you, and I'll see you on the next episode of Jim's Allotment Garden.